Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Investor Talk. We've got Francis Bellido, Dr. Francis Bellido from Quantum eMotion with us this morning. We spoke in February and we will pick things up again this morning. Symbol is QNC on the Venture Exchange, same symbol on the NYSE American Exchange. And we welcome Dr. Bellido to the program this morning, and nice to see you again.
Okay, my pleasure.
Couple of things. We'll start with the most recent and pertinent news. Tell everyone about the news that came out yesterday morning with the partnership in Taiwan with JMEM TEK, and a very, very significant milestone for Quantum eMotion. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so JMEM is a Taiwanese company specialized in encryption and security encryption. And they are very well known in the world of cybersecurity because they are very sophisticated, obviously, technology, particularly something that's called the root of trust, the PUF, physical unclonable function. I don't want to go into too much technology here, but it's a very, very crucial, in fact, technology, and they use it to create chips, security chips that are very high quality. And when we met, at some point last year, we saw immediately the complementation, I would say, of their technology with our technology. What they don't have is actually a source of randomness that is actually pure. And I remind people that the only way you can get a pure source of randomness is actually rely on quantum physics. And we have our technology patented, is able to create, almost like at an incredible, performance level, pure randomness, and the most important thing also the ability of our technology to be miniaturized. The JMEM is specialized in chips. Okay, so be able to bring QRNG at the level of miniaturization. It's actually very it's a game changer. Okay, so that's why we know because we've done it. We know that we can do that. So the idea now was actually to apply together to a consortium. There's a program by basically from the Canadian and also the Taiwanese government to encourage tech companies from the two countries to work together in some technologies. So we applied to that program, and it took a while, but they granted us actually basically the program, and we obtained actually a very nice funding from the both government to develop that chip. So yesterday, after our obtaining the grant, I announced that we actually signed the final contract. So right now we are just speeding up now the availability of the chipset now.
The contract itself runs through June of next year, so it's a 13-month contract. Is that standard, or could it have been longer, shorter? How does all that work?
No, actually, it's the contract basically of creating the chip. After that, what we have created. Obviously, the background IP it belongs to the companies, independently one of each other. What we created there new, if there is IP, would be a common IP, that we will own it together. And also there are parameters of commercialization that we'll share together. Okay, so it would be, I would say that the July 27 is basically the time that we give to ourselves, in fact, to get the finalization of the chip, probably the certification, etc. And after that, they will open up the door to another probably more detailed, detailed alliance, and commercialization.
At InvestorNews, I always like to sort of get to the brains behind the operation. How does Dr. Francis Bellido go from Francis Bellido to Dr. Francis Bellido, and goes from Montreal to the University of Geneva to get a PhD? Was this always your lifelong passion, dream to get involved in this field?
Uh, well, I'm known actually to be very eclectic. I mean, that's always been probably my difference. I mean, if I tell you that my first degree was in history and philosophy, you will be surprised. But that's actually, yes, that was my. But I mean, I've always been extremely interested to cybersecurity, and physics was my sweet spot also when I was a scientist. And even if I did most of my research, I have 40 published papers, I mean, as a scientist. But it was more actually in healthcare, I mean, developing new molecules in medical devices. When I worked a lot on medical device, I realized the importance actually of security, medical device. And that's what probably the link, to cybersecurity here. And, so I got interested. But I mean, if you're interested in anything, I mean, I don't need to be a quantum physics professor, at my level, because what is important for me, in fact, is, I've always been in the past 30 years, what I've done, in many with different technologies, is actually to be able to bring an innovation to generate cash flow out of an innovation. And in itself, it's actually a huge endeavor. Okay. So that's what interests me, is actually really transforming that innovation in a product who has utility and obviously a market. That's what I've been working in the past 30 years in healthcare, but now here in cybersecurity. Again, I'm surround myself to people who are really better than me in the technology part. But at the end of the day, you need to have somebody actually that can make the connection between technology, business, and value. How you create value. That's what I'm trying to do.
And in terms of creating value, eShield Q is coming on board the first quarter this year. That's going to help create some value as well for the company. It'll show up probably next quarter. Tell us about eShield Q.
So eShield Q, it's actually a major announcement that we did a few weeks ago. It's basically the amalgamation of our technology that we had before. I mean, the QRNG, plus the post-quantum encryption and also classical encryption, together with secure keys. Secure keys is the technology that we acquired at the beginning of the year, and that together is really represent the full stack now of quantum cybersecurity. And in many ways, we are really now unique in this space. Obviously, there are parts, that we share with others. There's tons of companies that are doing only post-quantum, for example, encryption. But unfortunately, I have to say that that's not enough to protect you against a quantum computer. You need a QRNG, and on top of that, the secure keys gives you the ability not only to protect you, against quantum computers, but also against AI attacks. So we are very, very proud of what we have now in terms of technology. And this is actually, for us, moving forward, is really the promotion of, I don't think that the markets, and companies have still digested what we announced it.
Another recent event too, and I want to get the name right, the TSO-IEL passing of the surveillance audit. What's the significance of that for quantum eMotion?
The ISO's, no, it's actually the ISO 27001. Yeah. It's actually the ISO. ISO is a system of regulations and and basically that protocols that that companies, if they want to be certified, have to follow, and it's very stringent. And in that case, 27001 is actually the system that takes care of security, cybersecurity in a company. So we already passed, last year was actually a big endeavor to do it. This year we had another surveillance. You have to renew it every year. And on top of that, we accomplished also the ISO 2017. 17 means also the same cybersecurity, but in the cloud. So it's very significant because that means that the whole organization is built around actually security. So when we starting to work with other companies, for example, having an ISO 27001, for example, almost guaranteed to your partner that you're not going to introduce viruses as you communicated with them, for example. So it's becoming actually, particularly in an era right now that everybody's going to be a little bit more it's a paranoiac about cybersecurity. It's a sort of mark of sort of a guarantee that you're doing the right things to avoid being the victim of hackers, yourself.
I think you've opened, correct me if I'm wrong, an office in California or going to.
Yeah.
That's one of the two areas I want to touch on now. Can you get us all back up to speed on gray box and things coming out of Irvine, California, and what's going on with gray box?
Yeah, so Graybox is our partner. Now a couple of years that developed these fantastic platform. It's called Take Care. It's a platform of digital therapeutics that allow actually in the healthcare system allows actually to monitor educated people at distance, patients at distance, particularly the ones who are suffering from a chronic disease. That the system doesn't really want them back, because, but they still need to have a very, strict monitoring. And you can do that without actually visiting the hospital, wasting a day, to go there. It's pretty frustrating. So, and what we saw in the US, because we are present now, an incredible opportunity, particularly, as you know, the difference between the U.S. and Canada. The U.S. don't have actually a public system as developed, here in Canada, and there is a private, private healthcare, is very important in the U.S. And we saw an incredible opportunity for elderly home cares, that needed badly to be better monitoring. So that's what and so we created probably opportunities for Graybox, we had the links, we had the contacts, and it's been an extremely very successful experience for them. So Graybox actually is now growing. What in Canada they had some difficulties because they were depending always from the government, and government is not a good payer. I'm sorry to say that, but it's not easy when you depend, purely from the government for a business, and particularly a young business. So in the U.S. opens an incredible amount of new doors that they didn't have access. So actually, it's going to be booming, soon.
I'm going to throw two names at you. Bertram Roulet. Could you tell us your relationship and his significance to you?
Bertrand Roulet?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's the professor of quantum physics that invented the technology. In fact, he created the technology. So I have a very, very good relationship with him. But he's a professor, so actually he's part of our sort of a scientific, board. So for the example today is we are in the middle of still, working on the NIST, application, etc. So he's playing a big role, being our basically our leader into quantum physics, because when you go through the certification, there is a lot of questions that goes to quantum physics. So he plays a big role in the company, but very focused on quantum technology.
Last name, can you comment on Catherine Lubier? She's just come on board, her significance and what she's going to do, helping move quantum emotion going forward, specifically in the US.
Yeah, so Catherine, yes, she's a very well-known figure, in Canada. She's been working as a public figure for quite a long time, being involved in politics. I think she worked with the Prime Minister Harper, at the time, and also had a strong experience with big companies, industrial big companies like Renault and Nissan, as you probably. And she was also the delegate of Quebec, in New York. Also helped a lot, with basically Hydro-Quebec, when they did the big deal, in New York, with on the supply of electricity. So yes, so she has almost a perfect profile for us. She's Canadian, but she's also a citizen in the U.S. She's living in the U.S. right now, and she's going to bring. She's not a specialist. She's not a scientist originally, but this is what we need as a board member. We can't just having people, on scientists or we need to have diversity, and I think she's the perfect figure for that.
I do too. And before we wrap it up, we'll quickly talk about the States. Huge milestone in February, getting listed on the NYSE American. How is that going for you guys? Are we getting more institutional eyes and ears on the company?
It's a very important point. I think part of our, I would say, vulnerability as a company before that was that 90% of our shareholdership is retail. So, and I don't want to comment too much about that, but you understand the issues, for a company, because it brings a lot of volatility, and I'm saying it very openly. I think my goal this year is actually, bringing way more institutional, into the company. And I think we having all the tools now, and also the timing is perfect. The only probably the bad news was actually when we were the day where we started actually being listed on the New York Stock Exchange, was the day where I think the war with Iran started. So, it didn't help, as you know, because when situations like that creates a lot of volatility, and young companies are the first one to suffer it, for it. So, but look, we have a very, very, healthy balance sheet, okay? And at the end, yes, it's never really very on the spot. It's never very nice when you start, sometimes moving in all kinds of directions that you're not expecting, because it's not supported by news or bad news or things like that. I think in many ways, the company, since the past, I would say 3 or 4 years, that just has started continuously progressing in one way or another. Okay? We didn't really have any bad news at all, So I'm very confident that when the context and the situation would change, the company can again do a quantum leap.
Well, the company is doing amazing, and certainly with you at the helm, that does not hurt. And it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you again and see you again. Hopefully come back and see us again sooner than 3 months. Sure. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about. And congrats again to a wonderful quarter and a great year going forward. And anyone with any other questions or anything we may not have covered today, take a look at the bottom here, and that'll get you all the information you need. And we thank Dr. Bellido for joining us today. And again, an absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot.
It's a pleasure, as always. Okay.